Did you know that Indian immigrants in the USA are making 100 grand a year as their median household income? Indians got that money, bling bling. That is crazy. The median income for Americans is only $55,000. And for other similar immigrant populations, let's say the Chinese, they're making $70,000. So Indians are just crushing it in the USA. When you look at CEOs in Silicon Valley, I mean, Indians are like a tiny little immigrant population, 1% of the population, yet 8% of CEOs of huge companies are Indian. And the figure is even higher with smaller little startups. I think there's 1/3 or 16% in that range. I saw two numbers of these little startups have Indian founders. Indians also make more money than people who have the same education as them. They make more money than people who are in the same position as them. And they have higher rates of self-employment and entrepreneurship. So it has me wondering, what is going on here? Are Indians just brilliant? Are they just lucky? Are they very hardworking? What is going on that Indians have such a significantly higher rate of success in the US than other groups? Now, maybe you're never going to go over to America if you're an Indian viewer, or maybe you're an American, you're like, you know what, I'd rather go live in India, baby, like me. However, it does have me wondering, what are Indians doing well to help them be so successful? And maybe you and I can learn from that. So let's take a look at the factors. Hey everybody, I'm Ben Jenks here in beautiful India. It is sunset here. We got a nice little sun setting over there. But I want to go through 6 factors as to what I'm seeing as to reasons why Indians could be so successful in the USA. So let's take a look. Number 1, humility. Now in the past, and I think there's a standard that we think of for a leader or of a big company or a CEO. Someone like a Steve Jobs who's extremely outgoing and personable and talkative. However, there's a growing trend in Silicon Valley companies to have a CEO who is very competent and also humble. And this is the first trait we're looking at. Because when we look at some of these Indian CEOs who have been so successful, humility is often mentioned. For instance, let me see here. Indra Nooyi, the CEO of Pepsi Cola, is one of the top 10 most humble US CEOs. How did they figure that out? I don't know how they got that, but she's mentioned. Also, Nitin Naraya, the Dean of Harvard Business School, he recently put out a very humble apology earlier this year about apologizing for how the institution has treated women. The CEOs at Microsoft and Nokia are also known for their vast achievements, yet they're also often talked about as being very humble. I saw a cool quote by Najib Berman in an article which may explain why this is. He says, given our strong emphasis on family and social relationships, Indian leaders work very effectively in groups with humility, which is a lost trait these days. And it makes sense. Working for someone who's humble is such a better experience than working for someone who it's all about them. Number 2, perseverance. Now, the first wave of Indian immigrants came to the USA in the 1960s. Second wave came in the 1980s. And if you're going through looking at these CEOs, one common trait that you're seeing, they've worked at these companies for over a decade at least. The Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, worked at Microsoft for over 2 decades. Sundar Pichai worked at Google since 2004. Indra Nooyi worked at Pepsi since 1994. So focusing, sticking to one company, sticking to one path could be a great way to get ahead. I mean, in my personal life, perseverance has been huge as well. Even on, let's say, YouTube or my blog, Chai Nomad, which you should check out if you're looking for Indian travel tips. You know, I started that a year and a half ago. I've written 120 articles, and it took months and months for the traffic to start to build. And it's still sort of growing. I still have a lot more work to do to make these things into more of a success. You might have had similar experiences in your own life. Third thing is people skills. Now, I'm currently, before bed, I've been reading this book, can't see that maybe, Quiet by Susan Cain though. It basically talks about introversion and how being quiet is actually a strength. In America, being extroverted, being very social, being able to communicate, having a large social network has been found to be one of the main factors of success. In our education system, for instance, at Harvard Business School, a part of most grades consists of, did the students speak up in class? Are they arguing their point? Are they persuasive? A lot of reason people get a job is because in a job interview, they're able to convince someone that they're going to be good at this job. Now in other cultures, let's say for instance, China, they have a totally opposite approach. Speaking up in class isn't something that's factored into the grade. Your work is factored into the grade. And you would only speak up in class if you had really thought out what you had to say, and it was very good. In an article about Chinese immigrants in America, Ellen Wu says she thinks that English fluency, networking skills, and the ability to negotiate is why they lag behind the Indians. Andrew Yen says Chinese students are often excellent academic researchers but lack soft skills, which is a major obstacle when it comes to competing with Westerners and even Indians in the overseas job market. Chinese students are not as open as Americans, Europeans, or Indians, and Indians are very active. They know well how to negotiate and how to persuade people. This sort of leads into the fourth point as well. India is the second largest English-speaking country in the world. There are 125 million English speakers over here. Whereas a Chinese, a Japanese, or a Korean immigrant is less likely to feel comfortable speaking fluently in English. And this has to be a factor as you're doing your studies, as you're looking for a job, as you're fitting in at a company, as you're trying to work your way up the ladder. Speaking English can be so important. Another one that I'm kind of curious about getting your input on is what about the influence of the family members on the students or on the kids? Now, it's a stereotype that Indian parents are much more strict than American parents. Is that true? Let me know in the comments if you're Indian, or if you're American, how strict was your upbringing? I would say that mine was not very strict. It wasn't a big priority for me to have a lot of money. My parents let me choose whatever I wanted to do. They put zero pressure on me about going into a certain field. Now, when I looked at some of the data, 51% of Indian parents said their goal was for their child to have a successful career, which was far higher than, say, the Americans, who only 20% said they wanted their child to have a successful career. It was higher than other ethnicities as well. It also seems like from other statistics, Indian parents did put pressure on their children to be successful. And hey, maybe this is one of the reasons why they're so successful. 91% of Indian parents aspire for their kids to get a college degree, whereas in the US, only 31% want them to get a college degree. That doesn't seem that good, actually. That's not great. But before we get to the final and most important reason, here's a word from our sponsor. If you like this video and want to see more, please click the like button. This leads me into my final point, which is having a college degree. 77% of Indian Americans have a college degree, 40% have a graduate degree. These numbers are far higher than other immigrant populations, and as we saw, Americans as well. And one of these reasons, or one of these factors, is the H-1B visa. Now, this is a visa in America that brings in highly skilled workers, and Indians get way more of these than other populations. They got 56% of all of them in 2011, I think, and we're seeing similar numbers in other years. Now, one source for some of the stats that I found was a book called The Other 1% Indians in America. And the author wraps up how Indians have been able to be so successful in America by saying this: there's no secret sauce. There are no maybe I can't speak English. There are no peculiarly Indian cultural traits. They came very carefully selected. They were not coming from poverty. The simplest policy prescription may be this: make sure everyone has access to education. And how many times have we heard this? Our parents, if you're an Indian, apparently more than American, but even I heard it: get a degree. It's one of the easiest ways to be more successful.